Welcome back to the Lamppost Listener. My name is Daniel.
I'm Phil.
And this is a podcast where we journey chapter by chapter through C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. This is chapter 9 of Prince Caspian, What Lucy Saw.
Here we go.
You excited, dude?
I am.
I still feel bad. I think I said this last time too. I can't remember, but I feel like I've been really hard on Prince Caspian recently, and I could not be more excited for this chapter. I loved it.
We were talking about it before the show.
Yeah.
You're really excited about this one.
I
Why
really
is that?
am. Well, why don't I do the chapter summary first and tell us where we've been, and then I'll jump into it.
Okay.
Sound good? So we left off in the last chapter with the Pevensies and Trumpkin. They were embarking on their journey to go meet Caspian at Aslan's Howe. So here's the chapter summary. Trumpkin and the Pevensies continue their journey towards Aslan's Howe. At night, Lucy is unable to sleep. She wanders into the forest and attempts to wake the trees. It seems as if the trees might wake, but the moment passes and the forest returns to silence. As the company is traveling the following morning, they are attacked by a bear. Susan hesitates during the attack because she is not sure if the bear can speak or not. As they journey onward, the company comes to an impassable gorge. Lucy sees Aslan and believes he is telling them to travel up the gorge. When the others look, they see nothing. Edmund sides with Lucy and wants to follow Aslan. However, the two youngest Pevensies are outnumbered when Trumpkin sides with Peter and Susan. Wearied and frustrated, the five travelers journey down the gorge, away from the lion.
Alleged lion.
That's true. We're not 100% sure. I love this chapter, though. I really, really do. This, after two chapters, which, I mean, they're still wonderful. They're in Narnia. It's not that I'm unhappy to read them, but I really, really, I read this chapter a couple of times getting ready for this episode, and each time I just thought it was better and better. I feel like this is maybe my favorite chapter of the book so far.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I love that chapter where Caspian actually flees the castle, chapter 5.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed that.
That one's my favorite.
But
so much tension.
Yeah, boy, oh boy, I really, really liked this Narnia thing. You like that expression, buddy?
That was the most leave it to Beaver moment I've ever heard on a podcast.
I love it. All right, well, what are
oh boy.
Yeah, what are your initial thoughts, Phil?
I thought this episode. I thought.
So tell me, what do you think about our episode already? We're about 2 or 3 minutes in.
Probably my favorite episode so far.
Already.
Okay.
Yeah,
off to a good start. I really enjoyed this chapter because of there was a lot of moments that were really nice moments.
Yeah.
Just little descriptions, a lot of peaceful moments. Lucy trying to get the trees to wake up, but then they don't. Still a nice moment. Not a lot happened, but it was a nice moment.
I think for me, this chapter has two passages in particular. We're going to read both of them that really just, I think this is Lewis at the top of his game. And I love that we get kind of two really, really wonderful passages here. And on top of that, I love the imagery of Narnia as Lucy's with the trees. I love them. I'm a big, big fan of world building and just imagining a fantasy world in my head. And so as they're traveling through Narnia, I really was able to picture it. Pauline Baines' illustration of this chapter are great. We get a couple of her landscapes. We get that illustration of the gorge, which I really like. And just all of this together, it's, to me, this is, when I'm thinking of a sequel to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, this is what I want. And this makes me really, really happy.
Cool.
So the chapter begins with the Pevensies and Trumpkin. They're on it's not a raft, it's a boat, right?
It's a boat.
It's a boat. They're on a boat as they're moving towards they're leaving the forest. They're moving towards Glasswater, and they're not 100% sure how to get there, especially the Pevensies who have, not been here in 1,000 years.
Yeah. You tend to forget.
Yeah, I know. I sometimes if I'm gone from a place for a year or two, I don't know how to get back.
Come back. I'm like, I don't know what a store that a lot of people are going to recognize. Oh, there's a Walmart here.
Yeah, that's one.
Okay.
So they travel for a day, and then it's time to go to sleep. And the rest of the company, they all fall asleep, but Lucy has a hard time sleeping.
Because she didn't row at all.
You think that's her just like she's not exhausted like everyone else is?
Yeah, and that's what it says. Lucy wasn't as tired as the other ones.
But still, man, she was out in the sun for a long time. I feel like, I think also a lot of it has to do with her age, too. She's just got a little bit more energy to her.
Yeah.
So Lucy is unable to sleep. She decides, it's going to be easier to just get up and maybe walk around, maybe tire herself out. She walks around. She looks up at the beautiful stars and the constellations. They're sleeping in a forest, and she wanders in, and this really interesting experience happens. C.S. Lewis even writes, "And now she began to feel that the whole forest was coming awake like herself." I love this idea that the trees, the forest, is coming alive at the same time that the Pevensies really are. Like this chapter especially, we saw it a lot in the last chapter as they kind of showed Trumpkin all the different talents that they had, but we're really seeing the Pevensies return to the king and queens that we left them as at the end of the Lion, of their time in Narnia, at the end of the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
An example of that being Edmund fighting with the sword.
Yeah.
He's been here 24 hours and it's starting to come back to him.
And just like that, we're seeing the same thing happen with these trees. Lucy has this sense that the forest is coming awake like herself. So there is a really, really beautiful passage here. I want to read a lot of it. Not too much that we're going to get in trouble with the C.S. Lewis estate, but enough of it that listeners to the podcast can really understand if they're not, don't have the book in front of them right now. And I will also, listeners, put a link to the illustrations here. Phil can't see all of them, but there are some beautiful, beautiful illustrations, especially if you can see them in color. These are some of my favorite Pauline Baines illustrations that she's ever done. Yeah.
Look at that.
So here's what Lewis writes as Lucy enters into the forest. Lucy's eyes began to grow accustomed to the light, and she saw the trees that were nearest her more distinctly. A great longing for the old days when the trees could talk in Narnia came over her. She knew exactly how each of these trees would talk if only she could wake them, and what sort of human form it would put on. She looked at the silver birch. It would have a soft, showery voice and would look like a slender girl, with hair blown all about her face and fond of dancing. She looked at the oak. He would be a wizened but hardy old man with a frizzled beard and warts on his face and hands and hair growing out of the warts. She looked at the beech under which she was standing. Ah, she would be the best of all. She would be a gracious goddess, smooth and stately, the lady of the wood. "Oh, trees, trees, trees," said Lucy, though she had not been intending to speak at all. "Oh, trees, wake, wake, wake. Don't you remember it? Don't you remember me? Dryads and hamadryads, come out to me." Phil, what do you make of this passage?
First of all, when I hear hamadryads, I picture hammerhead sharks.
Yeah?
But dryads. Is that what you picture?
No, that's not what I pictured at all.
I love this moment. I think Lucy just really wants the trees to come alive. Trees, trees, trees.
Yeah, she's calling out to them. Even it's like she's speaking, even though she's not intending to do it. It's like within her, there's this desire for them to come awake.
She can't hold it in anymore. She just really wants them to come back.
Lucy's my favorite Pevensey, and one of the reasons I love her so much is because I relate to her a lot, which is funny that I relate to the the little girl in the story the most, but she has I have the same desire as the reader, that I want to see these trees come back to life. I remember Mr. Beaver telling the rest of the kids, some of them trees might be spies and on her side. Back when they first entered Narnia.
I thought Tumnus said that.
Oh, I think you're right. It is Tumnus. You're
Even
right.
The trees have ears.
That's right. But I love I want to get back to that because I remember hearing that for the first time in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and just being like, that's so unique. That's so magical. Yeah. And here it's sad. They're just trees like we have here. That's not exciting. We have those right outside my house right now, right? It's not as exciting. And so I have that same desire as the reader that Lucy does, that I want these trees to come to life. So then C.S. Lewis goes on to write this. Though there was not a breath of wind, they all stirred about her. The rustling noise of the leaves was almost like words. The nightingale stopped singing as if to listen to it. Lucy felt that at any moment she would begin to understand what the trees were trying to say, but that moment did not come. The rustling died away. The nightingale resumed its song. Even in the moonlight, the wood looked more ordinary again. Yet Lucy had the feeling, as you sometimes have when you are trying to remember a name or a date and almost get to it, but it vanishes before you really do, that she had just missed something. As if she had spoken to the trees a split second too soon or a split second too late, or used all the right words except one, or put in one word that was just wrong. How frustrating is that?
So close. It also makes it more realistic. It's frustrating when a story has everything happen so easily. And this doesn't do that. She wants the trees to wake up. You think they're going to, and then they don't.
And it's exciting because I think as you're reading this as a first-time reader, you're like, it's happening. Yes, we're getting the trees are gonna.
I thought they were coming back.
Yeah, and it doesn't.
They don't.
And I share that same frustration with Lucy. So Phil, why is it? Why do you think that she doesn't succeed in waking the trees?
I wonder if it is going to take a bit longer. This was the start.
Why would it need to take longer?
Everything in tree language takes a lot longer to say.
I think you're getting your stories mixed up.
That's right. I think everything's going to take longer. It's just a different way of working. The trees probably lasted a very long time, and then they went to sleep, and it's going to take a while to wake them back up.
So you don't think that she didn't just say the one right word or the one wrong word or something, that no matter what she had done or said, these trees would not have come to life?
Maybe she said enough right words to get it started, but it wasn't enough to fully wake them.
Is Lucy the person who can do this?
I would think so. She seems to be able to do stuff that other people are not able to do.
You know, I'm not saying this. I know we go just one chapter at a time. I honestly, I don't remember what happens next.
Oh, really?
I remember parts of it,
club.
but I don't remember why they want to wake here. And for me, I seem to think that Lucy needs Aslan here. That it's Aslan who can call these trees back to life.
Maybe with his breath.
Yeah, maybe again he'll do that. And I mean, obviously, you and I have been very upfront from the beginning that we are Narnia novices, and so I could be completely wrong. Maybe it's just literally in the next chapter. I didn't read ahead because it's kind of exciting. I feel like I'm back in your shoes. I'm not as familiar with this story. I know a lot of the things that happens, but I don't remember every specific chapter because I never did a novel study with this book like I used to do with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And so my thought is that Lucy, no matter what she said or did, she does not have the power to bring them back to life. That maybe the trees, they want to come back, they want to be here because they see Queen Lucy in front of them, but it's only Aslan who can truly do this.
Right.
So after all of this, Lucy goes back to sleep, frustrated, but she is able to sleep. And the next morning comes, and our protagonists here decide to set out once again. I love this exchange with Edmund and Peter and Lucy, where they're trying to figure out, where to go. Narnia's obviously changed a lot in the last 1,000 years.
It's hard enough when you don't have a map.
Exactly.
Like, you don't know where everything is, but now everything's different.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and as we've stated many times on the show before, Narnia is even hard to kind of understand in my own head, and so I can get where they're coming from, being there themselves. But it's great. What happens here is Susan says she can't remember at all where to go, and Edmund's response is, "That's the worst of girls. They never carry a map in their heads." And Lucy says, "That's because our heads have something inside them."
Right.
This joke is so funny to me that it almost feels anachronistic. It doesn't seem to be like, it seems almost too modern to me. I love this. I think it's hilarious.
I was very afraid when I read the first line of that. I was like, oh boy.
Oh, that's not going to age well is what you were thinking?
Yeah. When it was inappropriate back then, but it was more accepted.
Sure.
But now we're very aware of this stuff. I'm like, oh, I can't believe that line's in there. But then Lucy comes in with a zinger.
Yeah.
I was like, woohoo!
It's great. I love this sibling. I know it's kind of it's a funny little comeback here, but even more so than that, the reason I love it more than just kind of a little chuckle is it's great sibling banter. I think I've really enjoyed that the Pevensies have come back to Narnia, and it hasn't been all fun and games for them. It's been frustrating. They come back, Cair Paravel's in ruin, and Narnia's been overtaken by Telmarines, all of these things. And so of course the Pevensies aren't going to get along super well. One, they're already siblings, and even like in my life when things were going great, I mean, you guys heard Emily on the show a couple of last season, we were arguing now and our lives are great. Yeah. So of course there's going to be tension between them, and I love the way that C.S. Lewis writes that into this story here, that it's such a big part of their narrative right now. I love the fact that they are all not getting along. We saw that last chapter. We're going to definitely see it as this chapter ends. This is a tough situation for them to be in. Their return to Narnia is not what they thought it would be, and that's frustrating.
Right. There's also a contrast between this moment that we just talked about. It seems like it's just a bit of banter, but by the end of this chapter, it gets a lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, oh, we're siblings. I think this is the beginning of things getting a lot worse. They're almost going to regress by the end of the chapter.
So your hypothesis is that there's going to be a splintering as the book goes on of the maybe that's a little too dramatic, but
not a splintering. Things are going to get worse. They're going to regress. By the end of the chapter, everyone's gone back to their old personalities almost.
I would definitely disagree with that.
The main thing is that they're not listening to Lucy. Like, Edmund's the only one who's listening to Lucy.
And that's why I disagree, because Edmund is like...
Edmund hasn't regressed, but Peter and Susan regressed.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay. Peter and Susan have been pretty frustrating for me throughout the entire book so far. In like a good way. I'm not angry at them. I think it's kind of part of their development.
Tell you what, next book, they're not invited back.
I was going to say in general, like, Susan has been pretty unwise in a lot of things that she's done and said. She's said some frustrating things. We'll get to it in a second, but there's the quote that Lucy has about, humans who are like animals on the inside, and Susan's like, oh, that would never happen back home. And it's like, really, Susan? Like, really? There's a couple of things that I feel like she has maybe not regressed, but we're seeing more of just this kind of, she's become a little arrogant.
I wonder if they're becoming too adulty.
You think like Peter and Susan are acting too much of like Peter did that in the beginning of Wardrobe, where they're like, well, we're the ones in charge, so we'll just tell, Edmund and Lucy what to do.
There's a moment later on where Lucy says, don't talk like a grown-up. Because she was asked, do you think you saw him? And she's like, I don't think I saw him. I saw him.
Yeah, before we start ragging too much on Susan, she has she actually does make a wise decision here, or at least an important decision here, because, as they're traveling this next day, a bear attacks them. Or at least it's following them, and it does start to attack, and it's Trumpkin, not Susan, who we've established Susan is better with a bow and arrow, but yet it's Trumpkin who takes care of this bear and keeps them safe. And Susan says, I just, one, we know that she doesn't love killing things, right? But also she's like, I didn't know if it was going to be a talking beast or if it was going to be just a regular old bear. And that's a very wise decision on her part, because especially as kings and queens, they do not want to be, needlessly killing the, talking beast all over the place. But there's this realization that like there really aren't a ton of talking beasts. And so we know that because we've been with Caspian for 4 chapters. But, I don't know how much they really took in as Trumpkin telling the story around the fire back at Cair Paravel, at the ruins of Cair Paravel.
We also get an interesting piece of information. Trumpkin says, when most of the beasts have gone enemy and gone dumb, but there are still some of the other kind left. Is that how it works? Was that bear able to talk earlier and then went enemy?
Again, we're Narnia novices, so I could be 100% wrong here. And I don't want to get too much into the magician's nephew, because some of this is in that. So I won't dive into that.
Consider it not even written yet.
I think the implication for me here is that yes, some of them have devolved, if you will. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but they've gone from being talking beasts back to being dumb beasts. And that's really tragic, isn't it? That they've lost that kind of, it's obviously not humanity, but they've lost that level of intelligence, and that what made them special and magical to begin with, they're now just animals like we would have in our world. Mm. So then after this exchange, we get to one of the passages I referred to at the very beginning of the episode. Lucy says this: wouldn't it be dreadful if someday in our own world, at home, men started going wild inside like the animals here and still looked like men, so that you'd never know which were which? And Phil, I know this is important, because it is a Kindle highlight here in my copy of the book.
1,397 people. Couldn't be wrong.
It's only 476. So Phil, tell me, why is this an important passage here? Why did 476 people think it's important?
I think that they saw the first 20,
and
it just perpetuated itself in there. Yeah.
Did when you were reading this in a paper copy, did this part stand out to you?
It did.
Why so?
I wrote "whoa" in my note. That's a terrifying thought. I also don't think it would be exactly the same because it's different with animals. I think for us, because we don't usually deal with that.
Do you think it's a realistic thought?
I don't. But I do, like, people can lose their minds.
Okay.
We have things like Alzheimer's where people are functioning, but their mind is not the same.
So you took it that way. That's really interesting. And this is why I love doing this.
The way I really took it was, what would that look like? And the thing that comes to mind is zombies, like AMC's The Walking Dead.
Okay.
But there's so much visual. You're not going to go up to a zombie and like try to shake their hand.
Sure.
You're not going to go up to a zombie and try to shake their hand.
Yeah. I took this I thought about this from Lewis's perspective, right? He fought in World War I. He lived through a depression, and he was around and obviously alive and literally began writing The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe during World War II. So he's seen horrific
stuff.
He has. He's seen some horrific atrocities. By the time this book is published in 1951, the horrors of the Holocaust would have been well known. So I think it's very clear. Like, you hear about, when you read about the things that he would have been contemporary to him, it's easy for him to think, like, of course. I mean, I would agree with him that, like, that's a situation where, like, those people like systemically killing entire groups of people have lost their humanity.
Wow, yeah.
And I think that's what Lewis is saying. Obviously, there's like, and this thing we have to struggle with is, especially as believers, like, there is the Imago Dei in every single human, even in
what
people.
What is that?
So they're made in the image of God, and so Lewis is struggling with the people, I'm sure, that look like people but are committing things that you really can't think. How could a human possibly do this? How could they? I was thinking about The Great Divorce. I've been rereading it because our friends over at Pints with Jack, David and Matt, have been reading that. So I've been reading along. And a lot of The Great Divorce, like a lot of C.S. Lewis's, I think of like that in the Screwtape Letters, there's just parts where it's almost like Lewis just kind of turns to the audience, even if it's through a character. And it's literally like he's speaking directly towards the audience, even though it's through the mouths of someone else. This, to me, is Lewis kind of speaking to us as readers. Wouldn't that be such a tragic thing? And I don't necessarily know that Lewis is saying this, but I'm inferring, at least, I could be wrong, I'm inferring as the reader that this does happen. And I think especially if you contextualize the time that Lewis is writing in, he has seen this happen. He was in the trenches in World War I. He lived in a time where the Holocaust wasn't a thing he learned about in school. He read it in the paper. So to me, it wouldn't be so crazy to think that he is grappling with the idea that humans are able to do such evil, right? And honestly, that's why Susan's comment frustrates me. But
she shuts the conversation down.
And I do understand that. She, in some ways, she's kind of compartmentalized. She's like, Lucy, look, we got enough problems here. Sure. Can you just wait? We can't try to solve all the problems at once. I mean, I feel like Anna says that to me all the time when I'll start kind of catastrophizing, and one small thing will turn into, well, look at this huge systemic injustice that we've got to fix. She's like, look, Daniel, we can't do all of that right now. Let's just worry about our block right here in the city, right? Or something like that. But at the same time, it's frustrating for Susan to be like, oh, we can't imagine things like that. And it's like, no, Susan, this is real. This is a real tension we have to struggle with. So maybe that's just me, personally reading into that. But I'm honestly, I'm a little frustrated with Susan just, don't worry about that, Lucy. It's not going to really happen.
I see that.
So after this exchange with the bear, and they gather the meat from the bear, and they take that with them, the Pevensies and Trumpkin, they journey forward, and they get to this gorge. They come up to this, almost, C.S. Lewis says it's a small precipice. And they look down at the gorge, and Peter's like, oh man, we're lost. Trumpkin does give a little exclamation here, tubs and tortoise shells, which is, I like the alliteration, one of his better ones.
They're getting better.
Yeah. Well, any of the ones where he's using alliteration, I'm fully on board with. I want to try to use them more in my daily life.
Yes. It's a good goal to have.
I love this realization because he's like, no, I thought the river Rush was here, or the Great River, right? And the realization this potentially could be it, that over 1,000 years, the erosion has caused this gorge to be created, which I love. Like, that's how much Narnia has changed. Yeah. That's so cool. But then it's here that we get probably the most important part of this entire chapter. And you're going to read here, right, Phil?
I am. Look, 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 cried Lucy. Where? What? Said everyone. The lion, said Lucy. Aslan himself, didn't you see? Her face had completely changed. Her face had changed completely, and her eyes shone. Do you mean, began Peter. Where do you think you saw him? Asked Susan. Don't talk like a grown-up, said Lucy, stamping her foot. I didn't think I saw him. I saw him. Where, Lou? Said Peter. Right up between those mountain ashes. No, side of the gorge. And up, not down. Just opposite of the way you want to go. And he wanted us to go where he was. Up there. How do you know that was what he wanted? Asked Edmund. I just know, said Lucy, by his face. The others all looked at each other in puzzled silence.
So, Phil, do you think that Aslan was really there?
I do.
Why do you trust Lucy?
If she didn't see him, why would it be in the book?
I mean, for me, even as someone who's read further, I think Lucy has proven that we should be trusting her more than anyone else at this point.
She's been right a lot, and no one listens to her.
Absolutely.
It's been 1,000 years.
Lucy is definitely, I think, who's the most trustworthy here. As far as me as a reader, I'm like, yeah, she was right about all the stuff in the first book, so why wouldn't I trust her here? I think what's tough for me here is, so if Aslan really was there, why did he disappear? If you're reading this, Phil, you haven't read the next chapter, I'm assuming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why did Aslan disappear then?
I don't know.
What are your thoughts?
Maybe he teleported in and it was the wrong place and he had to get out real quick.
Okay. So you don't have an actual...
Maybe he was phasing in and out and she just caught a glimpse of him.
Okay.
I think that he appeared for just a moment so that Lucy would see him and it might teach the others a lesson to listen to her. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's something to do with faith or trust to learn from that.
Do you think it's kind of like a test of faith? It wouldn't be a test of Lucy's faith because she sees him.
She saw him, but then he's
the
gone.
Test of the so maybe it still is a test of her faith.
A little bit, but more so the others.
Okay. It's interesting that Trumpkin too. He kind of stays out of it for the most part, and he's like, well, it's actually Trumpkin that's like, well, you know what? Maybe she did see a lion. Like all the other kids are like, no, you probably didn't see anything. What does Susan say? What did you think you saw, Lucy? Oh, that is so condescending.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were talking about earlier. Talking like an adult.
Yeah. But Trumpkin.
No we're adults.
Trumpkin
kind of
believes her. That maybe you saw a lion. You probably saw one of those dumb beasts again. You didn't see a talking beast.
You know what that feels like to me?
Yeah.
That feels like as if that feels similar to when people say that Jesus was a great teacher, but he didn't do all those miracles.
Oh, I like that connection. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, I'm sure he was real,
He's
right?
A real person.
But he didn't
He had some really good things to say, good ways to live your life, but then that is usually followed with, but he didn't do all those miracles.
But
he didn't walk on water. He didn't do this. He didn't do that.
Yeah, like a denial of the bodily resurrection or something like that.
Yeah,
but
he didn't come back from the dead.
Exactly.
That's a little too hard.
Yeah. I like that connection. I had never thought of it like that. So, we kind of got our sides going here where Trumpkin is like, you probably saw a lion. It wasn't Aslan. And Peter and Susan and Edmund saw nothing. And Lucy saw Aslan. Well, Edmund has this other passage that I mentioned. Edmund says this incredible thing here. I'm going to go ahead and read it. So this is when they ask for Edmund's opinion. Well, there's just this, said Edmund, speaking quickly and turning a little red. When we first discovered Narnia a year ago, or 1,000 years ago, whatever it is, It was Lucy who discovered it. It was Lucy who discovered it first, and none of us would believe her. I was the worst of the lot, I know, yet she was right after all. Wouldn't it be fair to believe her this time? I vote for going up." "Oh, Ed," said Lucy and seized his hand. So as they decide to kind of democratize this decision, it's Edmund who's the only person who supports Lucy. And this, to me, what beautiful, beautiful redemption for Edmund here.
He also took the initiative to start the vote.
Yeah.
He suggests we should put it to a vote.
And even with Peter's the High King, he's like, guys, we should all think about this together. To me, this is a turning. This is a huge turning point for his character. I know that, after he returns to Aslan's camp in the last book, we know he's a good guy, right? He's back. He's not a traitor anymore. We haven't really seen a ton of that. We've gotten glimpses of it up to here, but this right here is the pivot, in my opinion, where Edmund is he has owned his mistakes. He even says, "Look, I know I was the worst, but I'm not going to make that mistake again." What a beautiful picture that is of his redemption in this, that he's learned, a beautiful picture of acknowledging his sin, acknowledging his transgression against his family, and saying, I'm actually not just going to continue on in that way. I'm not going to be like Israel, right? I'm going to turn back to the Father, or to Aslan here, right? I love that.
Yeah. And not only just turning back, but taking the initiative, taking action, being bold enough, and you can tell he's embarrassed. He turns a little bit red.
Yeah. And, I think of 2 Corinthians when I was reading this part and thinking about the fact that Peter and Susan, the eldest, with Trumpkin, who's also obviously he's an adult, all decide not to listen to Lucy, the youngest, right? And I think about what Paul writes in 2 Corinthians. I'm going to read this here. This is from 2 Corinthians 5, verses 6 through 7 from the ESV. "So we are always of good courage. We know that while we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord, for we walk by faith and not by sight." I feel like anybody who's spent time in the church has heard that phrase, we walk by faith and not by sight. And this is literally what is happening here. Like,
Edmund did not see Aslan.
Edmund doesn't see Aslan, so he is going by faith here. And yet Peter and Susan look down the gorge and they say, look, down that gorge is the way that we want to go. Up doesn't make any sense. So they're going to walk by sight. They're going to go down where it looks to be the easiest and not go up, because that would be they'd have to have faith.
Right. And that's a excellent example of things that happen in this world. People do what makes sense a lot of the time, even though the Bible may say to do something else. Yeah,
I really, really love this picture. This whole, and this is what has made me just love this chapter so much. We've got so much depth to our characters here. We've had this beautiful description of the trees and the woods almost coming to life. I mean, this to me, oh man, I love this chapter. It was so fun, because then this is where it ends, right? They decide to go down the gorge.
The very last line is, "And Lucy came last at the party, crying bitterly."
And that's it,
Totally
right?
let down.
Yeah.
I just got goosebumps.
It's so frustrating that is the decision that Peter and Susan make. Trumpkin, I kind of understand. He hasn't...
I'm really disappointed in Peter.
Yeah.
I feel like Peter is not Peter right now.
I love that about Peter, that our hero doesn't come back being a hero all of a sudden. There's still going to be a journey for him to go on. And so he has come back and he's making some poor decisions. He's trying to be a leader almost too hard. He's like, look, this is what makes sense. We've got to go ahead and do this, because that decision of going up the gorge might be a little too risky, and I've got to make the best decision for all of us. And so he's almost in his head a little too much, I think, when he should be listening to his sister, because she's done that. We've done this before. I'm frustrated right now.
Why would she say that she saw Aslan if she didn't really see him?
I mean, I wish Peter would just pause for a second and go, all right, there's 3 options here. Either Lucy is lying, Lucy is crazy, or she's telling the truth. Yep. And if he just used some of that logic that the professor had taught him, we would be able to avoid what comes next. And he has forgotten that such an important lesson. And so as I think about our main theme for this novel that we've talked about since the very beginning, the restoration of the true religion after corruption, I really see Peter as being like the kingdom of Israel, which is just going back to like it's how quickly he is to forget the truth, how quickly he is to forget what he's already learned. And again, as frustrated as I am as a reader, what a great story that is. I mean, I know I've been a little hard on this book, but I am back in. And again, I know I talk in extreme, so maybe I'll be out again next week. But I love this. I'm in love with this. Phil, any last thoughts before we wrap up this chapter?
That's it from my end.
Well, we obviously leave our company of heroes here, moving down the gorge away from Aslan, which is a frustrating thing for us as readers. So in next chapter, chapter 10...
The Return of the Lion. Star Wars, The Return of the Lion.
The Return of the King. So in chapter 10, The Return of the Lion, Lucy has an odd dream regarding Narnia and Aslan. You intrigued by that one, Phil?
I am.
Yeah.
Now I want to read it.
Yeah,
now I can.
As soon as
we finish this episode.
Why don't we go ahead and just read those end credits so Phil can dive back into the book?
That's right.
Well, listeners, thank you so much for following along with us through this book. If you'd like to continue following us, you can do so on our Twitter and Facebook pages. If you have any feedback, you can email us at thenarniapodcast@gmail.com, or you can call and leave us a voicemail at 406-646-6733. We also appreciate reviews that we receive on Apple Podcasts. This helps other listeners who are just searching for maybe C.S. Lewis podcasts or Narnia podcasts or fantasy podcasts. This helps them find the show easier. Also, make sure you have subscribed to the show in your favorite podcast app so you can wake up to a new episode every other Wednesday. Our show's themes were created by Kevin MacLeod, and you can find more of his work in the links in the episode's description. Thank you for coming along on this journey, and we will be back next time for Chapter 10.